Hello, everyone. I'm Sangeeta Sastry. I live in the Bay Area. I work for a company called ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks has been a thought leader in the Agile space, especially for 30 years. We just celebrated our 30-year anniversary this year. If you've heard of Martin Fowler, he's our chief scientist. Jim Highsmith. These are all Rebecca Parsons, Neil Ford. A lot of luminaries come from ThoughtWorks, thought leaders. We call them luminaries. Many of them were the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto. So that's kind of where our legacy stems from as a company. Now, this talk, while it pulls from the thought leadership at ThoughtWorks, this is actually something I did before I joined ThoughtWorks. And so, how they come together, intersect, and give us insights for the future is what I will talk about. What else about myself? Currently at ThoughtWorks, but come from many years in the Bay Area at tech companies like PayPal, eBay, Salesforce, and Cisco. And so throughout my experiences, I've been leading business and digital transformations. This is an example of one of those, probably the richest one, I would say, because it was the most complex and complicated experience I've had so far directly. And when I say directly, I mean not even as a consultant, but actually as an employee leading the transformation. So why I talk about figs, you will see in just a minute. And let me make sure my mouse works. Yes, it does. Okay. I'm pretty sure you will all have heard of the saying building an airplane in mid-flight, or fixing an airplane in mid-flight, or building a new airplane in mid-flight at 30,000 feet and trying to get all the passengers over to the new one, and things like that. So this is a journey I will talk about. I won't name the company directly, but you can figure out who it is if you do some research, easy LinkedIn research. So one of the things, and I want to start with the fig tree and the strangler pattern, is Martin Fowler published this thought process, which then became a framework in 2004. So a very long time ago. Don't know that many people paid attention to it. He watched a fig tree grow in the forests of Australia. And if you watch it grow, the way it grows is it grows as a vine. Just want to make sure I have the right slide. It grows as a vine on a host tree, and then it puts down its roots right by the tree, and then starts taking over the tree, the host tree. So eventually, there's a point when both coexist for a short amount of time, and eventually the tree disappears and the host tree disappears. And it's only the fig plant which then hardens to become the tree itself. So if you think about that strangler fig pattern, you can apply this to legacy, like technology modernization projects, right? It's really the mindset of you introduce something new, you iterate through it, and then at a certain point, both coexist at the same time, the old and the new. And then you kind of cut off the old and just continue with the new. So if you look at that pattern, you can apply it to modernizing business processes as well. So how you isolate the process you want to modernize, cut a thin slice of it to be able to run this experiment, if you will, and then run it for a while. So there's two processes coexisting for a short amount of time, the old and the new, and then you completely remove the new. So this is the thought process and framework that was applied in this example that I'm going to talk about. So to give you a little bit of a background, This is a very large technology company that's based in the Bay Area, that has roots here for at least 40 years that I know of. They have been a thought leader and an innovator in the past. Right now, in the last, I would say, 10 years, they've been going through an existential crisis, especially in the last 5 years. There is a bit of overconfidence on their part on who they are, how smart their people are, what they do, how they work on those things. And with that overconfidence comes just not actually taking their competitors seriously, right? And with that, they found themselves in a position where they had to change or die as a company, and nobody wants to go the Blockbuster route or the BlackBerry route or any of those other Kodak, any of those other companies. So they decided on a new CEO. He was promoted from within, had been in the company for a very long time, so grew up literally in the ranks. Great person, great human being, very smart person. What he looked around and he said, we've been going through transformations, and I put that in quotes, agile transformations, at least since 2008. Many other things they've been transforming or trying to internally for much longer than that, and haven't really succeeded. The company grew by acquisition, so it was it's like the 10,000 islands off the coast of Miami. They're not really islands; they're just trees, mangrove trees rooted in water. But they operate independently, hence the island analogy, right? So this company had no way to integrate all of their acquisitions, did not have a single definition of a customer, did not have any unified customer lifecycle or a journey that all customers from this company would go through. So what they started with was that single definition of what does it mean to be a customer of this company, regardless of what products or services you use from the acquisitions or the core, where you start, right? Where you start, what your journey looks like, how you go through that life cycle journey. All of those things matter, but they didn't have a unified way of approaching this. So my work, at this time, I was at Salesforce, working with enterprise customers like this company. And I was assigned, my team and I were assigned to this organization to help them transform. One part of that transformation was aligning on that single definition of a customer, building a life cycle journey, and making sure that all the interactions are captured, and we identify what that journey looks like. Why that's important to start off with is what it looks like will determine the next thing we were going to do, which was launch a SaaS software. This is a hardware company. More clues. And the transformation they were going through, that they had embarked on, was to move from hardware to software, and then build a SaaS product and become a recurring revenue business, and then add services on top, like many others have done in the past. Microsoft, Adobe come to mind. So in their journey, then once they have that life cycle journey, they started to work on building that SaaS software in a cloud, in a public cloud. Yes, public cloud. And then they were to launch it, onboard all customers, so that for every customer, this is the front door to the organization. This is where you go to see all the things you own, all the things you do, all the interactions you have, open tickets, things are not working where you have problems. There's self-service modules available to accelerate learning on the platform and things like that. So my job, essentially, with my little team that could and did, was to enable an organization of about 2,000 people, engineers, product managers, designers, quality, you name it, we had it, and a PMO, of course, to enable all of them in a multi-layered transformation. So not just modernize their processes, but also modernize and update all the legacy skills that the people had. So talent, modernization, business process modernization, as well as technology and tooling to enable those business processes and the people. It was, of the 1,200 engineers, nobody had worked on cloud technology. It was amazing. And how do you get a group of people to learn new skills while they are applying those skills in real time to build something that's business critical and about to launch in 6 months? And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we were all punished by to work via Zoom, or a Zoom equivalent. So, which the company owned, which was lucky for us. So the problems were endless. The challenges were endless. The culture itself of the organization did not match the aspirations of the organization. So how do you take those two pieces that have a lot of friction and bring some smoothness there in the middle? And that's exactly what we did with the Strangler pattern. So headwinds for us, obviously, the pandemic was a huge one because it severely limited human interaction, which is very, very important when you start a journey like this, to build trust, to build alignment, and execute flawlessly. We did have an Instapot leadership team, which was especially the middle management layer. And they, it was the turn any transformation on. I'll give an inspiring speech and then I'll walk away. I'll come back 6 months from now and say, how's it going? And check on it, right? That's my definition of an Instapot leadership team. How do you make change stick virtually when you don't know most of the people? And they have change fatigue, right? They've been going through transformations for a very long time. We had individuals who literally said in the interviews when we did it initially, I have transformed, an organization in that corner of the company 3 times, and now I've come here, so I know what it takes. Great. Did it stick all 3 times? Why did you have it 2 more times? So culture was working against us. The overconfidence of the employees was also working against us in the sense, they were, when we talked about shifting the mindset and the culture of the organization towards what they needed to do and how they needed to be to succeed with this transformation, with this existential crisis transformation, answers that we got were, we're a great place to work. Why would we change? There's nothing wrong with our culture, right? So how do you counter some of those statements and that mindset, and how do you shift that was also an issue. Execution, period. We don't even need to talk much about it. It's always a problem. And it's always a problem because anybody can come up with a great strategy. There is no dearth of great strategies for any initiative that we pick up, right? We all know this. But where it falters is execution. And we don't look at the talent we have, the culture of the organization, and what's in the DNA. How do we shift those things first? Because that's your Titanic you're trying to turn around. And then look at technology as an enabler to make those things happen so that it becomes easier to turn. This is where execution falters. And most people don't look at organizational capabilities for execution when they create the strategy. So that's kind of where we were. Those were our headwinds. Tailwinds, we had a new CXO, so Chief Customer Experience Officer, who was determined to make this work through sheer willpower. And she did. And she made sure at least her staff, the top leaders, were aligned. While middle management, we still had challenges with, but we were able to overcome because she was driving this thing, and everybody was aligned, at least on the vision and the shared goals. So when you think about an airplane, the flight plan is the most important. It's the most critical piece, right? There are two. One is the flight plan. The other one is the air traffic control that helps you navigate the air. So strategy and execution need to be aligned, and both of those pieces help the alignment of each. Any plan can be grounded easily, like any flight. Many conditions can occur. Many do occur every time we go to an airport. There are either technical difficulties, weather-related challenges, or just people-related issues that grounds a plane easily. So how do we make sure we account for those? We might not be able to avoid them altogether, but how do we make sure we account for those? So when we started this transformation, one of the things we introduced to the organization as a whole was change management as a concept, as a framework. And the framework we used was one that we had created at Salesforce. It was derived from the Influencer book by Ron McMillan and Joseph Graney. Awesome book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. And it looks at motivations of people for wanting to do something, and how do you motivate somebody to want to change, right, on their own. And so there are social motivators, there are personal motivators, and then there are structural motivators. Social motivators are things like, we look up to our leaders. Do our leaders model the behaviors that we want to see in the organization, that they want us to do and they want us to follow? Another social motivator is, do we have an ecosystem of support, those communities of practice? Or how do we make sure that we can connect as individuals with somebody else who is in the same boat, and we can discuss, we can crowdsource answers to our problems or solutions, or maybe just support each other through this journey, right? Personal motivators, it's a famous radio station. We all know it. What's in it for me? Why should I care? Why is this so important? How will this make my life any better tomorrow than it is today? So every stakeholder constituency has its own needs and desires, has its own what's in it for me message. So crafting a change narrative for each of those stakeholder constituencies in a way that aligns with their needs is very important. The second part is, what are the values that I want to hold as I go on this journey? And are my values aligned with what we are trying to do? If I don't fundamentally agree with the direction that we're going in, I will not give my 100%, right? I will slowly start to disengage. And both active disengagement and apathy are bad in any transformative effort. So how do we make sure that we align the values of the organization, of the change, and of the stakeholder constituencies to make sure that everybody goes in the same direction at the same speed together? Then you have structural motivators, rewards and incentives in place, right? How will my new behavior be rewarded or recognized? How will my performance be managed? If we're still managing performance by the older standards, think about the fig tree, right? If you're still considering the host tree and measuring our forest by the number of host trees, it's not helpful. It's really the fig that's taken over the host tree, right? So how will those measurements replace the old ones so that we're looking at the new world and moving in that direction? So there's a positive correlation there. And of course, how are you making the processes simpler? How are you making it easier for us to track the new changes or adopt the new changes? Tools like, replacing a legacy system with Jira, or a product roadmap with AHA, so you can manage those product roadmaps and connect to Jira so the execution teams have visibility. So all of those things from a change management perspective were rooted, and that was the foundation for the execution plan. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. It wouldn't have stuck. We might have launched, but it wouldn't have stuck, and it has stuck. So movement in any direction is progress, because at least then you know whether you're going in the right direction or not, and you know to pivot as we need to. So transformation program really started with an army of volunteers. When I started, I had this is around the time I became an employee of the company to lead this, because otherwise, as a consultant, it would have been very difficult to make significant changes and stay accountable for those changes. And so as an employee, I started with 8 coaches and a team of about 40 Scrum Masters, doc writers, all kinds of, I was the island of misfits, if you will. And a ton of volunteers from the organization, different parts, up and down and across all functions and leadership areas. What we did was build that customer lifecycle journey. What we did was build the learning path for engineering and, of course, product and design and literally everybody in the organization, so that they know how to use cloud technologies, so that they know how to put engineering best practices into play, that they are agile. So here's this legacy organization that was heavily entrenched waterfall, that probably planned and implemented something, delivered something in about 18 months. We brought them down to every 2 weeks in a span of 8 months. And how we did that was the Strangler Fig approach, by isolating a process, using that as a thin slice with very clear indicators of what we were changing and by how much. What needle am I moving and by how much, right? Am I reducing something or am I increasing something? And then letting people, helping them learn, letting them do it. And then as soon as they start to do it, the next thing you do is move on to the next piece, so that there is no time for an organization to stop and rest and say, oh, good. Now that we started planning, we have a product roadmap, we started planning every quarter, we're good, we're transformed. No, we're not, because the next goal is not quarterly, but bi-weekly. Let's get into that. But while we do that, we build the capability to be able to deliver bi-weekly. So it was kind of a not a chicken and the egg, but there's a different analogy for that. While you're doing something, you do something else. And it's not yak shaving either. I'm very good at that one. So, building a portfolio, a product portfolio, defining those products and services with the portfolio team that I had. The agility piece in terms of introducing everybody to Agile, we built our own Agile framework, which was essentially you take Scrum and then you start to scale it farther up, but you really start with the mindset and the values and the cultural aspects. And sprinkle a dash of change management practices and techniques in there. And then look at engineering practices. Very, very important. For an organization that had no idea what DevOps was, being able to build a team that focused on that, that was trained in CI/CD and automation from 17% automation, we went all the way to 97. That was pretty impressive. Again, a lot of the same people are still there. We brought in some new ones in key positions, and that helped us accelerate what we were trying to do. Periodic reviews of what we were doing, how we were doing, really helped. And again, keep in mind, this is all virtual, right? And that was the toughest part. Then you start to introduce discovery processes. So you're attacking the beast on both ends, on the front end and the back end, in the sense when you're starting to plan, discovery comes even before that, right? And then, of course, the execution capabilities need to be built, and then that it becomes a feedback loop. So all of these parts and pieces were what helped us achieve what we were able to achieve in 8 months with 2,000 people, 8 coaches, and probably about 40 Scrum Masters and Agile delivery leaders. So big team, but very, very critical team. It's the team that did, and not just could. Designing the organization at the onset. This is how teams need to be organized. This is how work will flow. These are the interactions, the engagement model between the teams, and of course that operating model with the rhythm and cadence of all the things that need to happen, including those periodic reviews or showcases and demos, was very, very important, because all of that showed every week the progress that we were making and the relentless pursuit that we were on to climb a summitless mountain. Because every time you climb a mountain, you get to the summit and you look at the next peak and go, oh, this wasn't it. I have to go there. Okay, let's keep going. So that was the journey. When we started this journey originally, and that's why I have this mountain climbing metaphor here. It was like we started with climbing the mountain, right? You want to climb a mountain. You know where the summit is. You have a map. You have your tools. You have your backpack, an ice pick, all kinds of necessary enablers for you to be able to climb that mountain. And then, of course, if you get lost or there's an avalanche or something, you get stuck, you at least have some idea of what to do in that circumstance so that you can navigate around it. But when we actually got there and started the work, it was like building a new plane at 30,000 feet and moving all the passengers over. And what we did was apply the Strangler pattern to be able to do that successfully.